So flexibility and employment benefits are crucial in today's work environment. How do companies create a workspace that attracts and retains top talent? Let's hear from the leaders who are setting the new standards. Now I'm going to hand over to Minty Tafisi, I hope I pronounced that right. She's Director at RSM Australia. So let's all welcome our panel here today.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to start out by getting the panel members to introduce themselves. Brooke, may I start from you, given you're next to me?
Yeah, cool. Kia ora tātou, ko Brooke Ho. I'm Brooke, one of the co-founders and co-CEOs of Sharesies. I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're on today and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. So we are a FinTech born out of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and now, operating in Australia too. We started 8 years ago. We provide a wealth app, so access to investing, saving, super and insurance. And on the other side too, we partner with companies. So we partner with around 700 companies at the moment, where we help them with their staff share schemes, really passionate about staff owning shares in the companies where they're helping create value, and also them understanding that too and feeling really confident as investors and shareholders, and also managing shareholder management and communications too for companies. So we've got 700,000 users on our platform and around 5 billion in assets under management.
Excellent.
And I'm a mama too.
Very impressive, thank you. Over to you, Matt.
Hi everyone, Matt Loop. I lead the Asia Pacific business for Rippling. I've been here in Australia for the last 20 years working with 4 different US headquartered technology companies, establishing their presence in market and then growing. So Salesforce, LinkedIn, Slack, and now Rippling. Rippling is San Francisco based HR and finance platform, payroll platform. Series F, $13.5 billion, 3,500 global employees, and we've set up here in Australia about 14 months ago, and wonderful to be here, and a dad as well.
Brilliant. James, over to you.
Hi everyone, so my name's James. I lead marketing for Australia and New Zealand for Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange. Prior to that, I was at TikTok when they launched in Australia, and before that, Facebook in London. So I've got a bit of experience working with some of the larger US-based tech companies and their approaches to creating ideal workplaces. I am not a parent, by the way.
Thank you. A bit about myself. I'm Minty Tafisi. I work for RSM Australia. RSM is a dedicated sponsor of Intersekt, as well as being a member of FinTech. I work in the international tax and transfer pricing space. Prior to RSM, I've worked for Big Four accounting firms here in Australia, as well as overseas. All right, now we're done with the introduction. I'd like to kick off this conversation by throwing about 2 to 3 statistics. I used to be a statistician once, so I can't help myself. In preparation to this panel discussion, I looked up the level of flexibility working arrangement here in Australia as well as worldwide, and what the tech-up rate is like. It appears based on a survey done by Australian Human Resources Institute, which I would say is a very credible one, based on over 500 people they've surveyed. There are around 93 to 95% of employers who provide services, who provide the flexible working arrangement, hybrid working, etc. However, the take-up rate seems to be about only 53%. I couldn't make sense out of that. Different industries, etc. Maybe there is a bit of breakdown. But today's topic is about how have we done with this flexible working arrangement? What are the pitfalls, and what does it look like going forward in the next 3 or 5 years' time? Would we be doing the same thing, or are we going to be going back to the good old days or advance it further? So I'd like to start with the first part of our topic, which is about creating perfect working environment. What does that look like? And is it universal? What I would think is a perfect working environment, would that be the same as, for one of our audiences? Brooke, again, you're next to me, so we'd like to start with you.
When we were starting Sharesies, I really wanted everything to be perfect. And I really wanted us to be the perfect exemplar of a company. And we were becoming a B Corp, and we went through the B Impact Assessment. And so B Corp, does anyone know what a B Corp is? Yeah, so we are one, which is cool. And it means that we're held to a standard in terms of how we treat our people, so the employee space, along with customers, the impact we have on the community and the environment around us. And I quickly started to learn like what perfect is different for different people, and my strive to be perfect was never going to, that the bar raises as time goes on and we have higher expectations. So I think it's about being incrementally better over time and making sure, obviously, you meet that high standard, but then how are you improving over time? So I guess I don't believe in a perfect place because it can differ for different people at different times. But I think it's important to create a really healthy, high-performing and really great, thriving workplace. And so at Sharesies, we have 160 people in Sydney, Auckland and Wellington, and a few in Melbourne too. And for us, I think, when I think about what creates a really great work culture and what enables people to really thrive, high trust is a really important aspect of that. So the trust that you give to the people and the ability to have fun, I think, at work is really important, however that shapes up for them. And I think ultimately part of trust comes down to that flexibility conversation, which I'm sure we'll dive into a bit more. But ultimately, if you've got great hiring practices and you're hiring great people, they want to do exceptional work, and doing exceptional work doesn't typically mean in a certain time period at in a certain box or office. And I always akin it to my first time I became a manager. I hired this person, and I was getting feedback on them that, why are they starting at 9:30? They're not good at their job, blah, blah, blah. And actually, they were really good at their job, and they were outperforming, but they just weren't a morning person, and they would stay until like 7:30 every day, but people didn't see that went home. And I learned I had to help, manage this person's perception, but also make sure they are aware of the expectations other generations may have in terms of way of working, or other, mental models people have, and then how do you help support, make sure, you just care about getting great work done, and it doesn't matter how, as long as you're chasing the outcomes. So anyway, that's my well-rounded, I guess, well, not well-rounded, but a bit of a chat about the perfect working conditions.
I love it. It's a great example of working through a historical bias that you had, perhaps, around you arrive at 9:30, which means you're a slacker. You're coming in late. You're not doing the 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. And this is an exercise that all of us have been going through in the last certainly 4 years since COVID turned everything on its head. Look, for me, the two values and things that always come to mind are trust and transparency. And how those exist in an organization. If you start with trust, this is really around, perhaps on the employer side, how much they trust their staff members and how much they trust that the business can actually be productive and maintain the expectations from a performance standpoint that they're expected to deliver. And any breaches of that trust means that they're probably going to move back to traditional ways of working. So on the employee side, they're expecting flexibility. They're expecting, perhaps by default, that their employers trust them to do their work wherever. But what you have happening is coffee badging, when people show up for 30 minutes, swipe in, and then swipe out. You've got quiet quitting, people kind of for 2, 3, 4 months just effectively not working, or quiet vacationing, leaving and going on holidays and not telling their employer they're actually on a beach in Bali and trying to work. All of these are breaches of trust. If you're a company of 200 people or 2,000 people, one of those incidents poisons the well. Your leadership sees that, and all of a sudden they probably in their heads go, how often is this happening? And I don't trust the team. If I just found that out happened under my nose, I want to see them in the office, and they're going to probably, pull really hard on the ripcord and bring everyone back. And so where you have trust, where and I think transparency on how work's going to get done. You have really clear rules of how you're going to work, the number of days you're in the office, the way you're going to communicate in and perhaps out of office hours, particularly with things like right to disconnect. All of these things, if you do that, then you maintain trust. So I think those are really the two things where you've seen a lot of success. You hear success stories about companies that are fully flexible and are remaining productive. But you also hear the horror stories and companies that are having a lot of internal conflict with their staff because they've ripped away the flexibility they perhaps got granted to them during COVID. And you're going to start to see staff leaving, going to other organizations, or voting with their feet. So I think trust, transparency are really the two values that I think are most important for companies to keep top of mind.
Couldn't agree less. Thank you, Matt. How about you, James? What are your insights?
I think Brooke made a good point. The definition of perfect working conditions changes depending on the individual and definitely changes depending on the time of their life. Like for me, for example, when I was at Facebook in London in my 20s, late 20s, free food, free drink, like access to everything and anything you want. That was definitely perfect at the time. But now I definitely value flexibility and autonomy a lot more. And that flexibility is, to do the work that I've been hired to do in the time that suits me, in and around my other commitments, and in a place that suits me as well, right? And the second part, autonomy, like the trust that the business puts in me to deliver good work, like empowers me to do some of my best work. And I have to say, like recently, I should highlight, Binance is remote first and always has been since inception. And so that culture of putting trust in people, giving them a lot of slack, whether rightly or wrongly, empowers them to do their best work. And for the ones that take advantage or it doesn't suit, tend not to stick around too long. So yeah, trust, flexibility and autonomy are two of the things that create my perfect working environment at this stage of my career.
Excellent, thank you. I guess there is, two parties to this, relationship or transaction. And we spoke about what employees expect or what sort of systems should be in place, the trust, flexibility, communication, and transparency. By the end of the day, this would need to translate into something tangible for employers and businesses, right? And where I'm heading with this question is that are businesses experiencing more productivity, right, relative to the good old days of 9 to 5, but also a lot more engaged employee, a lot more contribution, a happier, and also ultimately higher retention. Re-employing and retraining is one of the huge costs a lot of employers experience. So what has been your experiences within your organization? I just want to change the ordering. So James, I will start from you.
So I can't necessarily speak to the changes since going 100% remote because, like I said, Binance has been remote since day one. But what I can say is it works for both the business and the employee. So for example, in Binance, like 100% remote since day one, started 7 years ago, is now scaled to over 5,000 employees across 50 countries, established itself as the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange with over 200 million users. And everyone is running and supporting that business, working from all corners of the world, whether it's at their kitchen table or in their bedroom, on a beach in Bali. And so, yeah, for the business, I think it's fair to say that system and approach can work and can be really successful and establish yourself as market leader. On the employee side, and I speak as an employee as well, the benefits, I think, are pretty evident, both from the felt experience, but also in all the research I've seen. So, you get higher job satisfaction results, better retention and loyalty amongst staff, and also like better financial outcomes for people. I know I don't miss commuting into the city. I don't miss the time spent on public transport or the costs associated with that. And so, yeah, I think it can work on both sides.
Matt, what was your experience?
So a couple things. One is we are 3 days a week in the office. We're 2 days at home. I was the first employee in region July last year, and we'll be 70 at the end of the month. So, reasonably rapid hiring in the last 14 months, and with most of them, they are coming from a world where they were at home or where they were at fully flexible organizations, and they weren't their best selves. They weren't as productive. So an interesting trend, kind of going back to transparency, is we've been very clear around how we're going to work, and it's really been the preference of a lot of the people that we've brought into the business, which means I think all of us are working in harmony in the style that we want. And I got the clean slate start, where I didn't have to unwind or have 10,000 people's expectations being wildly different. I've been able to hire with full clarity on who we were bringing in and how we were going to work together. Just the other thing I would say is, again, I was at Slack during COVID, so we were using our own product and being highly productive. It's great that you provide flexibility, but if you stink using the technology tools that are going to allow you to work from anywhere, then you're not going to be productive. So I think for those organizations who haven't adopted technology, who might still be like living in an email world and not collaborating from wherever they might be as effectively as they could, I think that's going to hurt. So I think leveraging the tools that are out there, being a great remote or flexible work environment, having trainings on how to best utilize these tools, that has been, I think, a big part of what I've seen as being productive organizations at both Slack and Rippling, and I think what I hear from customers too.
Yeah, I think I just like thinking back on the evolution. Like I was in banking, and you left your computer at work. It was a desktop, and then I moved to Xero, and it was fully laptop, all Google. It was just easy and great, and I remember just feeling so like the sense of freedom in a lot of ways. And then when we started Sharesies, obviously we were using new tech, but 2 months into starting Sharesies and quitting my job at Xero, I was pregnant. So even like creating Sharesies and growing it through time, I've learned how to do it while also juggling other things like becoming a mum and other family commitments and all of that. So I think it's kind of in our DNA. So when obviously we did go into forced lockdowns and things like that, there were a few little bumps, but a lot of people knew you could just get going, and I think a lot of tech companies would have been in that space. Yeah.
I guess where we are at with this is that, in order for us to be a lot more productive, taking advantage of the flexibility afforded, as Matt said, there are platforms, etc., we can use, and it is on the businesses to make sure that those platforms and technologies are available. How about when it comes to scaling up, the sort of the management-employee interaction, in that we would need a different way of managing people, right? We spoke about the trust bit, we spoke about the transparency bit, but also do we actually need to relearn the management skill sets and our interaction in order to get a lot more out of it? So that's one part of my question. The second part of my question is there is this trend towards companies enforcing, minimum of 3 days. And Matt, you and I earlier spoke about a news paper you read today about Amazon requiring, full-on reversing the entire thing to 5 days a week. And my question is, to what extent, Amazon is probably a very large company, can afford to do that because of the branding, etc. Whereas for the average business, if you do that, then it could put you in a competitive disadvantage, right? Because you're not going to be attracting talents and also get that employee satisfaction. So the question is the desire to reverse this trend is driven by, I will assume that low productivity, low engagement, or whatever it is the company is not getting out of employees, and is that because the sort of not making the resources available, such as the platforms we spoke about, but also the management new skill sets? Because if we don't address those ones, then, it's not only Amazon. Every second other business is also going to experience it and then reverse it. So are we actually, shooting ourselves on the foot in that sense? I'll start the middle now. Matt.
Oh boy. So maybe the first part of the question around does the manager-employee relationship need to change? Do we need to upskill our leaders? Yes, in a major way. I think there's never been more burden or a challenge on the manager layer of a business than before. Managing all of the dynamics of a flexible work arrangement. I think embracing the fact that well-being is a topic and part of our working lives that is not going away. It is a massive priority in this country, which is a wonderful thing, and it needs to be, I think, top of mind in how you manage, how you're leveraging technology, how you're having equity, how you're managing and building diverse teams. All of that falls on the shoulders of managers. So I think if you're not investing in the tool set, and some of this, it's not aptitude, this is kind of EQ kind of training that's really important on how you manage the person, not the operational side of the business. Now I'm already going to forget the second part of the question.
Oh, yeah. Who here's a founder in the room? Oh, cool. Who here works in a founder-led company? Oh, sweet. Who's read Founder Mode? That came out by Brian Chesky. Okay, cool. So for all the founders in the room, I highly encourage you to read that. There's a article on Paul Graham. He wrote a summary of it, but also Brian Chesky, one of the founders of Airbnb, has a video about it. But essentially, I'm going a little bit off course, but it does come back to it. There's a difference between founder mode and manager mode, and quite a lot of founders are put into manager mode pretty early on. So you hire people, you need to empower them, but their disempowerment isn't a founder's. Their empowerment isn't a founder's disempowerment. And so I think it's quite interesting when you're thinking about management, approaches, and then a founder's kind of approach to it. There can be quite a lot of differences in the way that we kind of show up. So I just want to put a shout out there for any founders. It's a really interesting read and quite empowering, I think, in terms of when you're thinking about those times where it can be a bit of a tough juggle if you're figuring out if you're doing the right thing. It's like, if you've got an intuition there, go for it. But I think as managers, so one thing we do at Sharesies is if anybody is hiring somebody who's, junior in their career, we do make sure that hiring manager has a commitment to being with them at least 3 days a week in an office. And that is because we really want to make sure that person's invested in. We want to make sure anybody that, no matter their career growth, when they leave Sharesies, they're leaving way better off, from way awesome opportunities, exposure, and that they've got that support. So that is something that we have set up, and that's working really well. But in terms of another thing in terms of managing towards outcomes more is being really clear on expectations. And I think there was this point in maybe the last few years where we kind of moved away from that a bit, and it was a bit more values-based kind of performance management compared to performance management, with values being a way that you show up. So instead of, to make that a bit more clear, you might do a performance management and it will be rating on your, how they rate on how they're showing up in the values, and a bit of qualitative information with it. We're actually moving to are they meeting the expectations or not of kind of what we've set out, and then when they are, how are they doing that, in the way that the values should be coming to life. And that's a key part of meeting expectations. And I think that is so much kinder to staff when they feel like, I know what's expected of me and I know how to outperform here, and they can just manage those outcomes. And it's also great for that flexibility, because if they're performing really well, you've got that trust on both sides. It doesn't matter how they're showing up or where they're showing up. So I see a bit more of a swing, I think, happening towards that way. Now, some of you might have been in that way the whole time, but it does feel like there's either employer, the employer. Right now, we're moving into an environment where there are less jobs being created, or we have had, and so therefore there's a bit more of a performance kind of focus, and that does kind of flip over time. So I think it's important for us to get the balance right there in terms of trusting our people, making sure that, we're performing really well and ultimately delivering on the purpose that our companies are set out to achieve.
How about you, James?
Yeah, I totally echo what Brooks just said there. I think it ultimately comes down to expectations. And just to follow on from what Matt said, me as a manager, I've had to develop a whole new skill set and get way better at clarifying what the expectations are, over-communicating priorities, checking up on those priorities, and just in general, just oversharing. I've never been one to share too much, not wanting to go over people or undermine people. But in a remote-first environment, it's critically important that you go above and beyond to overshare and over-communicate those priorities and expectations. And I think people respond well to that. Everyone on the team knows fully what they're working on, why they're working on it, what the priorities are, and that's resulted in greater output and greater results for the business. I would say it's not for every business. Obviously, Amazon, an incredibly successful business, mandating everyone to go back to work 5 days a week. And they've obviously got their own reasons, and clearly that will drive increased results for them, or they assume it will. But like you said, Minty, it works in the benefit of other players, right? So for us, it becomes a competitive advantage for any employee that values that flexibility. And so we'll lean into that.
Well, I've just been told we're running out of time, but very quickly, what are your final thoughts? Where are we going to be in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, my hope is that staff equal shareholders in the companies that they work in, and then we create more wealth equity over time because of that. And I think in terms of, I think flexible working is here to stay. I hope we're not having conversations about it. It's just part of the norm. And then it's about, making sure there's really great opportunities to people who have rich lives, however they, want that to show up, and that we're having companies that are really outperforming in the side of the world. Yeah.
I think we're still infants in the flexible work world. We're kind of 4 years in, and we're still testing a lot of things out to figure out what works for all of us, both as employers and as employees, how you want to work and live your life at the same time. I think there's a lot of testing still to be done, and I think we're just getting started. I think trust and transparency, kind of going back and reiterating those two values, I think, again, over-communicating, as James said, and being really clear on how work is going to be done in an organization, be willing to flex, to learn where something's not working, not be stubborn and make adjustments that accommodate the employee and the employer, and just continuing to work towards getting that right balance for both parties. And I think when you do that, you get trust in an organization, and you'll get productivity if you have that.
I'm a big believer in technology, and I think it's done amazing things to enable us all to work on so many more different areas than we ever thought possible 20 years ago. And so I think going forward, I think people will have more choices than ever in terms of what they work on, and not just what they work on, but how they work on it. So whether they want to work in the office, whether they want to work, on the beach. I think that flexibility and that choice is going to be even more abundant in the future, which I think is a great thing for employees and businesses alike.
Excellent. Thank you very much for taking your time to discuss this topic with us. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion, and the recurring message for me is trust, flexibility, communication, and transparency, so that we can continue to enjoy this flexible working arrangement, which I think is fantastic. Please a round of applause for.
Thank you.